Once upon a time, in a small dusty town called Bakersfield, California, the summer heat was so brutal that even the birds stayed hunkered down in the shade. At the edge of the main street stood an old, massive oak tree with branches spreading wide like an umbrella over the sidewalk. Coincidentally, this tree grew right in front of the hardware store owned by Mr. Harlan, Hank Whitaker, the richest man in town. Hank was famous for being a tight-fisted, sharp-dealing businessman. People said if he ever ate a candy bar, the ants would line up to lick his fingers, and he'd try to charge them rent for the privilege. He sat at the front of his store every day, hunched over his ledger, eyeing every passerby like they owed him money. One blistering afternoon, with the sun turning the asphalt into a frying pan, an old farmhand named Uncle Ray carried a heavy bucket of tools on his shoulder as he trudged down Main Street. Uncle Ray was a hardworking, simple man who'd spent his life picking crops and fixing fences. Sweating and shaking from the heat and the weight, he spotted the deep shade under the oak and decided to take a quick break. He set the bucket down and leaned against the low brick wall in the cool shadow. He'd barely caught his breath when Hank Whitaker spotted him from inside the store. A sly glint flashed in Hank's eyes. He stepped out and barked, "Hey there, what do you think you're doing? Who gave you permission to sit on my property?" Uncle Ray jumped up, hands together in apology. "Sorry, Mr. Whitaker. It's hotter than blazes out here. I just needed a minute in the shade. I'll move on right now." Hank pointed at the bucket. "Shade? That tree's growing on my land, so the shade belongs to me too." "You've been using my shade, time to pay rent." Uncle Ray blinked in disbelief. "Mr. Whitaker, shade's a gift from God. How can anybody charge for it?" "I'm just a poor man, I got nothing to give." Hank growled. "Then beat it. You're stealing my shade and arguing about it. Pay up or I'll call the sheriff and have you charged with trespassing." Uncle Ray's heart sank. He had a small roll of cash tucked in his pocket, money he'd saved from odd jobs for his granddaughter's college fund. Hank's eyes locked on that bulge in the pocket. Softening his tone just a bit, he said, "Look, you seem like an okay fella. Why fight over it? Buy the shade from me outright. Then you can sit under it any time you want. No one will bother you." Desperate and trusting, Uncle Ray thought it might be worth it for a permanent cool spot on hot days. With shaking hands, he pulled out the roll, $500, a small fortune back then, and handed it over. Hank counted it quickly, then had his clerk draw up a notarized document on the spot. "I, Harlan Whitaker, in sound mind, hereby sell the shade of this oak tree to Raymond Jackson. The tree remains my property, but its shade belongs to Raymond Jackson forever." They both signed and thumbprinted. Hank smirked inside. What a sucker. Uncle Ray walked home, where his sharp-witted grandson, Jake, had just come back from his construction job. When Uncle Ray explained what happened and showed the paper, Jake slapped his forehead. "Grandpa, you got taken. Who buys shade? That old skinflint robbed you blind." Tears filled Uncle Ray's eyes. He threatened to call the law. "I got scared." Jake's heart hurt seeing his grandpa cry, but as he read the document carefully, a slow, clever grin spread across his face. "Don't you worry, Grandpa. Hank sold you the shade. Now that shade is gonna make his life miserable. Just sit back and watch." The next morning, Jake walked straight to Hank's hardware store. The early sun threw the oak's long shadow right across the storefront and over Hank's favorite rocking chair on the porch. Jake kicked off his boots and plopped down right in the middle of the shadow. Hank arrived, saw the young man lounging in his spot, and exploded. "Hey, kid, what the hell is this? Get off my porch." Jake looked up calmly. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker." "With respect, I'm not on your porch, I'm in my shade." He pulled out the notarized paper. "Says right here the shade belongs to my grandpa, and he gave it to me. Right now the shade's covering your porch, so this spot is legally mine." Hank's jaw dropped. He'd pulled plenty of fast ones in his day, but this was a new level. "I sold you the shade, not my store." "Get up or I'll throw you off." Jake leaned back. "A deal's a deal, sir. Wherever the shade goes, my rights go. If it bothers you, move your store." "I'm not moving my shade." A small crowd gathered, folks waiting for the bank to open, guys grabbing coffee next door. They read the paper and started chuckling. Boy, S got a point, Hank. Your signature's right there. Hank fumed, figuring he'd wait it out. The sun would move, the shade would leave. But as the morning wore on, the shadow slid over Hank's display of paint cans and garden tools stacked outside. Jake calmly stood up, walked over, and sat right on top of the stack. Shade's here now. Gotta follow it. Hank yelled at his employees to move everything inside. His sales slowed as customers stood around watching the show and laughing. The real trouble came in the late afternoon. The shadow stretched longer and longer, creeping across the sidewalk and right up the driveway of Hank's big house behind the store. His pride and joy, a place no one was ever invited inside. When the shade crossed the front porch and slipped through the open screen door into the living room, Hank blocked the doorway with both arms out. That's far enough. This is my house, Jake held up the paper. I'm not claiming your house, Mr. Whitaker, but the shade's in your living room now. Where my shade goes, I go. Stop me and I'll call the sheriff for breach of contract. Hank turned pale. The sheriff already had a low opinion of Hank's penny-pinching ways. Grudgingly, he stepped aside. Jake walked in, spotted Hank's leather recliner with a cold beer and a plate of fresh-baked cornbread sitting on the side table, right under the shadow from a low branch. Jake sat down, took a bite of cornbread and sighed. Man, this is good. Thank goodness my shade gave me a nice place to rest. Hank looked ready to burst a blood vessel as his wife peeked from the kitchen, horrified. As the sun began to set, Hank smirked. Sun's going down, no more shade. Time to leave, kid. Jake smiled, pulled a battery-powered lantern from his backpack, lit it, and hung it from a low branch that reached toward Hank's bedroom window. A fresh, deep shadow sprang up in the opposite direction, falling straight across Hank's bed. Look at that, Mr. Whitaker, my shade's back. Tonight I'll rest right there on your nice soft bed so my shade doesn't get lonely. Hank roared, no way in hell, that's my bedroom. Then honor the contract or call the town council. They'll love hearing about this. Trapped, Hank begged Jake to sleep on the back porch instead. He provided dinner, a cot, and even someone to wave a fan against the mosquitoes. All night Hank paced while Jake relaxed. By dawn Hank had a plan, cut the damn tree down. No tree, no shade. He called a crew of tree trimmers to come at first light. The chainsaws started buzzing, but Jake burst out of the house. Stop right there, you're destroying my property. Hank shouted, it's my tree. I sold you the shade, not the tree. Jake replied coolly. That tree is the source of my shade. Cut it down and you destroy my $500 asset. That's vandalism and theft. Neighbors poured out, along with folks heading to early church. Jake raised his voice. Listen up, everybody. This man took $500 from my grandpa for the shade of this tree. Now that I'm using what I bought, he's trying to cut it down. That's like selling a cow and then shooting it so nobody can milk it, the crowd murmured angrily. He's right, Hank, you signed the paper. Hank's wife stormed out. End this nonsense before you ruin us. Defeated, Hank's shoulders slumped. He clasped his hands. All right, Jake, I was wrong. Greed got the better of me. What'll it take for you to let this go? Jake rubbed his chin. It's not just the $500 anymore. You humiliated my grandpa and made us go through all this. Return the $500, plus $500 for watching over your house and porch, and $200 for the trouble and lost sleep. That's $1,200 total. Then you can have your shade back. Hank's face twisted in pain, but with the sun rising and the shadow ready to invade the house again, he had no choice. He went inside, opened his safe, and counted out $1,200 in cash. Here. Take it and never mention this shade again. Jake counted the bills, pocketed them, shook hands with the onlookers, and walked home. The townspeople laughed and teased Hank for weeks afterward. Hey, Hank, how much you charging for shade these days? When Jake handed the $1,200 to his grandpa, Uncle Ray's eyes filled with tears of pride. He hugged his grandson tight. From that day on, the shade deal became the favorite story in Bakersfield, and Hank Whitaker learned the hard way that some things, like a poor man's dignity, aren't for sale. And clever tricks can cost you a whole lot more than you ever planned to spend.